Good morning, Bitcoin. My name is Thomas Hunt, and this is Proof of Work. Proof of Work is a show about the people behind Bitcoin, what they do, and how they got here. Today our guest is Max Keiser.
Thomas, great to see you. This is awesome. I've been waiting for this for years.
It's exciting. We're finally here together at
yeah,
last.
Exciting.
So I'm going to ask you everyone's most favorite and familiar question first. What was your first computer?
Oh, I think actually it would be 1980, in the 84 maybe. I had a Compaq desktop. It was like one of the first desktops. I remember it had like kind of large and had kind of a swivel stand and
like a pizza box.
Not that like chunky, very chunky. And we were doing stock analysis and spreadsheets and things on this.
Nice.
And so that was probably my first computer.
And it allowed you to analyze the markets in ways you couldn't before?
Yeah, it was doing a lot of, at that time, like leverage buyouts were becoming huge. And so that meant just looking at companies and figuring out what assets they had on the books and how much you could borrow against those assets, and leverage buyouts were big. And trying to guess what the next big buyout was going to be. And so that was really the 80s, was the corporate raiders at that time. Carl Icahn was big at that time, and Mike Milken. And so, it became very spreadsheet-oriented and computer-oriented. That was like computers hit Wall Street in a big way, and it changed Wall Street in a big way.
So that was before the internet. Your computer wasn't connected to anything else. You had to bring all the data into the computer yourself, right?
Yes, you were loading data. That's right. That's right.
And that allowed you to analyze the markets. Previously, were you doing it by hand? Was it more laborious process? Or?
Well, the firms would generate research, and then you use that research. And then I think it just became exciting that then a lot of companies were trading at that time and going public. So Microsoft went public, Apple went public. So these computer companies were, going public and creating a tremendous amount of interest. Intel, Oracle, and a lot of them went out of business, of course, or got gobbled up. But I did follow tech stocks, the tech industry as a stockbroker, and then it's just naturally you end up buying a computer, and what the hell is this all about? And that's, I guess, the first experience I had with it.
So did you go away from computers, or were you always with a computer from then on?
I didn't really get back heavily into computers until the mid-90s, when I had a company in Los Angeles, and I think we ordered like 1,000 from Dell, right? So Dell was the go-to supplier for corporations and startups, and they were, Dell famously advised Apple to go out of business. Michael Dell said that Apple should just close the doors and go away because they'll never work, they'll never be successful.
There was a point there where their brand was so valuable, they were saying they could sell Apple Cola and they'd be fine. And the computer thing's a nonsense. The brand, the image, the logo is good enough.
But yeah, well, that's true. And but at that time, there was Dell. Michael Dell was king of the computer distribution, really. And I had a company in Los Angeles, and we bought a ton of those, and I have a few of those still in my possession.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so you're always with computers then, and then how did you go from being interested in computers as a stockbroker to being into Bitcoin?
Well, as I mentioned, this company in Los Angeles I had is the Hollywood Stock Exchange.
Oh, and I heard about that.
So we were trading virtual securities, and I had to actually invent a technology for that. So there's a patent that I have called the Virtual Specialist Technology. It's patent number 5950176. And this is really a patented centralized digital scarcity. And whereas Bitcoin is decentralized digital scarcity, the virtual specialist and the virtual currency that goes with it and the securities are more of a centralized digital scarcity. So we had an on-ramp of users all the time, and we gave away Hollywood dollars, and then they would invest these in the virtual securities, movie stocks, star bonds. And then to fix the problem of prices getting completely out of line, because like everyone would buy Leonardo DiCaprio,
sure,
and the price would become quite hyperextended. So the virtual specialist kind of figures out a way to normalize price discovery on the back end for thousands of these securities. It was eventually that technology was sold to Cantor Fitzgerald, and they use it actually to trade derivatives. So they use it to trade synthetic derivatives to this day.
Well, I remember the Hollywood Stock Exchange. It was a really interesting idea. I was always into movies, but I never made any money by being into movies. So if I could predict Jurassic Park would be a big hit, I could go on there, bet into the futures. If it's a big hit, I get paid out, and then I could actually make money on movies. That was the basic idea?
We give you the Hollywood dollars, and then to get around gambling laws, basically we maintained a fixed exchange rate into US dollars, and then we maintained a window on eBay. People could take their Hollywood dollars and go to eBay and swap them out for US dollars. So you could make money trading on the Hollywood Stock Exchange, but we had to do so in ways that went around gambling issues and some other issues, and avoid other securities laws. And then Cantor Fitzgerald, when they bought the Hollywood Stock Exchange, they attempted to introduce genuine box office futures contracts as cash settlement, and then at the very last minute, Chris Dodd killed it by outlawing box office futures contracts, because the industry hates the idea. And then Chris Dodd was made head of the MPAA, the Motion Picture Association of America. And I try to tell them that this was going to happen because it's very disruptive for the movie industry if you have your customers are deciding 6 months in advance what the box office is going to be. So it kind of thwarts the whole marketing engine of Hollywood in a lot of ways, and so they hated it, and we kind of went to battle with them.
Because I'd heard the Hollywood Stock Exchange got shut down, so it was
exactly that's why.
The political aspect that it was shut down.
The studio shut it down with the help of Chris Dodd.
It seems like it might have been good advertising for the studios, right? People are making money on it. They're more interested in movies, new ways to get involved. Do you think that they'll recreate some kind of the idea with this IPO or ICO token craze, start tokenizing the new James Bond movies?
Well, it did. It was the first really commercial prediction market. So I invented, you could say, prediction markets. And now we have Augur and things like that on the blockchain, on ICOs, and they're doing prediction markets, and they can do prediction markets in entertainment. There are, in my view, you could do a lot more with it, specifically in the movie business, but maybe I'll come back to it at some point.
Maybe. Well, I think you could also combine the idea with kind of Patreon, raising money for a small film, betting on the small film. Maybe you could not only fund the film, but make money off the film, have it be a success, all from this side venture that has nothing to do with the actual filming or the actual movie.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can approach it. The industry is very strong. They have a very strong lobbying group, and it's hard to go against them, as I found out with this Hollywood Stock Exchange project. So that is a factor.
I wonder if the actresses and actors will be tokenizing themselves, especially with ideas like reselling John Wayne's digital image in the future. If I could buy a piece of John Wayne and then all the commercials, I get $1 or something.
There are several projects that are in various stages of development and that do this type of thing in the entertainment industry, the celebrity industry, Hollywood industry, tokenizing things. And David Bowie was very advanced, very ahead of his time. He introduced the Bowie bonds. He sold his entire catalog for maybe a $50 million bond offer.
Sure.
And it gave the rights to the royalties for, I think it was maybe 10 or 15 years. And that was exactly when Napster hit. So the royalty business crashed after the Bowie bonds.
Wow.
And now by the time the Bowie bonds, the catalog reverted back to the Bowie estate, the music industry actually started to come back a bit. So this guy was always a freaking genius in everything he did.
He really was. I've seen that clip that's floating around the internet right now where he describes the internet as this alien life form. And that was like 1995. And we're looking at it now, we're like, yeah, that's it. Like, it's completely out of control. It goes wherever it wants, does whatever it wants to do. And we're interacting with it. But he could see that.
Absolutely. He's an extremely fine artist. And, artists can at times get into a certain tunnel vision and see into the future in ways, and they express that artistically, and we say, wow, it's touching me in a way, I'm not exactly sure why, and then 20 years later you're like, oh, I get it now, and this is always very interesting, isn't it?
Well, and certainly it felt like that when I discovered Bitcoin. I had looked at the Federal Reserve and the other system, and I was like, well, we're not going to be able to fix this. I'm a small person, it's a big system, I'm never going to flip that over. But then I found Bitcoin, and then a couple years later they built the companies around it, BitPay, Coinbase, and I thought, wow, this could really be a thing. What was it like when you found Bitcoin? Maybe just a couple years earlier, obviously, but what was it like?
So, John Matonis, who had come from Hashcash, from the encryption side of the business, he came on Keiser Report and told me about it, and then I got contacted by Tony Galippi from BitPay, and he said, we want Max and Stacy to come to this conference in Prague in 2011, and he bought our tickets and paid us in Bitcoin.
Nice.
So that's how I got my first Bitcoin, from Tony Galippi.
Yeah.
And so we went to Prague, and I heard Rick Falkvinia at that time, who was extremely strong voice in Bitcoin at that time.
Sure. Now with the Pirate Party.
Right. He's created the Pirate Party. I met our friend. Oh man, I'll think of it in a second. But so many people were at that event that I still have contact with. Amir Taki.
Sure.
Amir Taki, who I think is really one of the most important individuals in Bitcoin. And so I ended up speaking at another event that he did. And so that was a really interesting event.
So you were already on RT at the time, and they invited you to come out and talk about Bitcoin after Matonis?
Yep, so that was in 2011. Our show started on RT in 2009. And this year will be 10 years.
Wow.
So we'll be about 1,400 shows or so that we've done. And we're doing a show, a series right now called To the Moon, and we're going back to the archives. And we're going to create like a history of Bitcoin.
Sure.
And we're talking to all the people that we interviewed back then. And
like
interviewing them again, and then looping in some of the archival footage. And we've had some great interviews, and we're doing some of that here at this unconfiscatable event. We've been able to get some interviews.
Great. Yeah, I think that would be good. Also, just replaying some of the price predictions when you're telling people to buy it at $1 or buy it at $10, whatever. It hurts people a little now, but it's still completely prophetic. You're telling the truth as you saw it, and it turned out that you were right. Even at 3,000, we're still up from 100.
Right. It was at $1. I mean, I got to say, what Rick Fogfina, his base case was basically that there's no reason. He laid out why Bitcoin could grab 1 or 2% of the global Forex market, and the global Forex market is $5 trillion a day. So that would, extrapolate back to a $100,000 price. So if you believe that Bitcoin is hard money and it does what it says it does, then you could see it going to 100,000. So we started carrying that around as a target of $100,000.
Sure.
And, that's still the target, I think. Because the fiat money hasn't gotten any better. The banks are still highly unstable. They're due for a wave of collapse again. And Bitcoin came around as an answer to 2008. That we haven't had a global financial crisis since Bitcoin really was introduced. So now when we enter into another global financial crisis, we'll see how it acts really in the thick of a major crisis. My thought is that it's going to do very well.
Well, and it's different now that we have that to fall back on. I remember when I saw the Cyprus event in 2013, which really drew me back into Bitcoin, the price spiked to $300 because these people had a way out. The governments were controlling their banks, they were taxing their bank accounts, and they'd frozen all the ATMs. But now suddenly they could, well, maybe they didn't, but they could at least theoretically buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And this idea got out to everybody else, and they were like, wait a minute, they could get out. I mean, I can do it now because I'm in the US, I have access to ATMs, whatever. They maybe didn't. But now, like Venezuela, they actually have access to the currency. They're actually getting it. They're mining it. They're local Bitcoining it. It's
Venezuela is a great test case. Remember, there's a lot of capital flight out of China that drove a big move recently in the last 2 or 3 years. So the adoption curve is being driven by crisis. It's more by fear than greed. The fear of losing it all is driving the price higher more than the greed of making it all.
How's that going to turn out in the end?
It'll turn out to a much higher Bitcoin price and a much lower, exchange value for fiat money, as it should.
Is there any way for Bitcoin to succeed and change the world without wrecking the old system?
No, because the old system will never give up control. Even Hitler in his bunker was convinced he was winning World War II right before he shot himself in the head. So this is what Jamie Dimon will be in his bunker, surrounded by a mountain of fiat money, convinced that it's all going to work in the end, and then that bullet will go through his brain, and we'll never hear from him again, thanks Satoshi.
Did you catch any of the documentaries about the Fire Festival? Because
I heard it's really funny.
Thing. There's one at the end where they talk to the guy, and they say he was completely positive right up until the give up point.
Well,
he thought everything was going to be fine, and he was going to power through it, and they had good intentions. They wanted to put on this festival. Certainly, they had no experience, and they were way out of their league. They had no chance at it, but the intentions lasted right up till the end.
I'm out of here.
All right.
I got to split. We'll do a part 2.
Yeah.
Well, this is part 1.
Part 1.
The end of part 1.
End of part 1.
Okay, part 2 coming soon to a screen near you. Thanks so much. I've been waiting so much to be on the show. I've been watching it for years. I think you're one of the strongest guys in the space, and anyone in the space owes it to people like yourself who pioneered the way. Damn it, that's what I'll say.
Thanks so much, Max, for joining us. Really
Alrighty.
appreciate it, man.
See you soon.
Yeah.